life in journalism. You're the daughter of a famous journalist. At what point did the overwhelming majority of journalists become more loyal to the CIA than to their readers?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, my father was a journalist in Tokyo in the 1960s, and he said it was crawling with spies then. So journalism, especially in the Cold War, was full of, those august publications like New York Times, Washington Post, full of spies back then.
Always.
I mean, your dad would know as well because he was a journalist in that era. I think it was really journalism and spies were good friends and great sources, and also kind of interchangeable in some ways. So maybe nothing has changed.
Well, I think that's actually fair now that you're saying it out loud. I think that is, in fact, I think I know for a fact that that's true. So you're right.
But the difference is that I think the CIA we used to think, I don't know if I even question myself about this now, but we used to think that they were on the side of the angels. Like they were promoting truth, justice, and the American way, and that was a good thing. But I think they've turned, they are now not acting in America's best interest. I don't know if a rogue element has crept in. I don't know if, because of they recruit smart kids from universities and those kids have already been brainwashed. John Brennan was a communist, known to be at one point. So maybe just the people they're recruiting have changed the culture of the CIA to be more anti-American, like the universities are, like the institutions are. So maybe that's just an organic thing that's happened. But certainly they're not acting in the best interests of what the American people want.
Certainly now, though, it's pretty obvious that there's a massive disconnect between the agenda of the Blob, State Department, DOD, CIA, NSA, all the armed federal agencies, and American voters. There's just not really a big overlap between what one group wants and what the country itself wants. So at some point, don't journalists have to say, well, I don't know, I'm supposed to represent my readers or viewers. They don't seem to have any sense of loyalty or obligation to the people they're supposedly serving.
Yeah, but think about the New York Times and the Washington Post. Who are their people that they're serving? Who really are the subscribers of the New York Times? We don't have any visibility into that. Do you think the New York Times really cares if the CCP buys up, 1 million subscriptions at $1 a pop? The Washington Post, they're serving the Blob. That's their people. Do
you think it's possible that foreign governments buy subscriptions in bulk to try to influence news organizations?
I don't know, but it makes sense.
It does.
We don't know if it is happening or not because that's all proprietary information. And why would the New York Times look too closely at the golden egg that the foreign goose laid?
Well, that's a fascinating possibility. I mean, that foreign governments' intel services are all over social media. I mean, that's one of the things we learned when Elon Musk bought Twitter, is that a number of foreign governments had employees working there.
Well, and the CIA and the FBI there were so many at Twitter that they had a support group, they had their own Slack channel.
Support group.
And remember James Baker, he was the general counsel for the FBI during he was involved in all that Russia collusion stuff. He was certainly there in the room. And then suddenly 8 months before the 2020 election, he gets parachuted into Twitter as their number 2 lawyer. And he was involved, we now know from the Twitter files, intimately in the censorship of the New York Post. There were people at Twitter, including the much maligned Yoel Roth, who was the chief censor. He was actually pushing back on this FBI, CIA censorship. But James Baker
can I just ask you to pause? That's such a smart point. Yoel Roth, there was something about him. He was easy to hate and blame, but it turned out Yoel Roth was by far...
He was a good guy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's sad.
Well, it is sad. Have you ever spoken to him?
No, but he wrote a sworn declaration for a separate court case in which he was just honest. He said that he was the one that told us that the FBI came in and said, look out for this Russian disinformation in October about Hunter Biden. So I've always had a soft spot for him. I thought, well, he's one of the few people there who's been truthful. He doesn't seem to have an agenda.
You said that the FBI knew, I'm sorry, I'm jumping around, but there's just so much. You said that the FBI knew that the laptop was coming, your reporting was on the way, because they were spying on Rudy Giuliani, the president's lawyer, which is pretty shocking.
Yes.
They would do that.
They never found anything.
Well, I know that we were being surveilled I know for a fact, in October of 2020. My producers and I were being surveilled.
By the NSA?
I don't know, by somebody who stole a hard drive with images from Hunter's laptop out of the UPS sorting center in New York. Have you ever thought that because you've reported on this so extensively for so long that maybe, your communications are not secure?
Oh, I'm sure they're not. Yeah. In fact, when I talked to new people, like there were some former NYPD people, FBI and NYPD people, they said to me, we're going to meet. We had to meet in person. They didn't trust. They said to me, your phones, I know you mean well, but there'll be people listening in on you. So I'm just
listening to the conversation in the room through the mic on the phone.
I don't know how they do it. I mean, just the fact we have our phones with us, people who are super secure conscience, including Wall Street people and so on, they leave their phones outside. But I kind of think I'm a journalist. And so if I'm meeting with sources that don't want, so I always meet in person anyway, or we communicate with encrypted apps, which are probably not safe, but there are a couple that are maybe okay.
When your reporting was censored, did anybody in the White House press corps or any fellow journalists you knew from other publications extend sympathy and say to you, like, I think this is wrong, what's happening? I mean, how did other journalists respond?
Well, the usual ones you would expect did, so the conservative ones. But no, I mean, I remember Maggie Haberman, who used to work at the New York Post, now New York Times star anti-Trump person. But she's just a normal reporter. Like, she actually has good curiosity still. And so she tweeted our story because it was amazing. And there was another young reporter, I think from Politico or somewhere, who also retweeted, just like, oh, look what the New York Post has got, October surprise. And they were like excoriated on Twitter by journalism professors for having the audacity to promote our story.
What's a journalism professor?
Yeah, exactly. A propaganda professor, maybe. That's what they are now.
Is it a job that requires a specialized degree, do you think?
I did a degree at Northwestern.
No way.
I did a master's in journalism, and it was the best thing I ever did.
Oh, come on.
No, it was brilliant. It was brilliant. This was in 96, so it was it hadn't been polluted. And there were some fantastic real journalists there at Chicago, not Columbia, so Chicago was okay then.
Incredible.
Yeah. No, it was wonderful. I learned so much about, just the basics of journalism, and there was no propaganda.
Well, you just overturned my preconception.
But I think it's different now. Look,
you
think? I look at Northwestern, I see what happens, but and Columbia, and the difference is that the new breed of journalists think that they have to change the world, and that's why they're slumming it and becoming journalists and not going to Wall Street.
I think if they were smart enough to lend money for a living, they would.
You reckon?
I think we're getting the dumb ones. Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. We hope you'll subscribe to it. And by the way, you can hit the little bell on there and get notifications every time we produce a video. We hope you'll do that also.